And we're live. Welcome, everybody, to our first weekly roundtable on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. As we've been putting out there, we've been going to change our weekly night, change the night of our weekly roundtable. We'll see how things go and so forth, and we'll go from there. Tonight, joining us, we have Lisa O'Keefe, candidate for New York Assembly, speaker, and moderator. Michael Vasquez, who's here every week with us, political commentator, and Dragon of New York. And Dow Grimm. And you find him as Grim Liberty on Rumble. Frank's running a little bit late. He will be here. And I am Mike Marshall, one of the co-founders of the Liberty First Foundation. Lisa, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you're running for New York Assembly. So kind of give us a little bit of what that's all about and what brought you to decide to throw your hat in the ring.
Okay, so I'm running in the 123rd district. I'm running against somebody who's very well known, Donna Lepardo. And the reason that I decided to run is because I still remember when this used to be the Valley of Opportunity. And we are the second highest poverty rate in all of New York State. Our poverty rate is double that of the national average. And our homeless rate from 2020 to 2021, it went up 50%. So I used to be an economics teacher, and a long time ago, I ran for office when I saw that there was a need. And so I threw my hat in because there's definitely a need now. And so I'm on the Republican, the Conservative, and the Independent Economic Renewal lines, and I am going to make a positive difference. And the other reason that I ran, and tell me if this sounds familiar to you, when I go door to door, people keep telling me, I feel like I've been silenced. I feel like nobody hears me anymore. We're supposed to be where our government is the voice of us. They're supposed to listen to us. They've totally forgotten the power is up here with us, the people. They've gotten us to believe that the power is up there with them, but it's not. We, the taxpayers, we, the citizens, we're their employer. We give them their jobs. We vote them in, and we can fire them by voting them out.
Well, that's just it. And actually, that's a lot. We have discussions on here all the time about voter apathy and so forth. And that's the way a lot of America feels right now, is that we no longer have a voice. And very key point. And Democrats are all gathering behind Harris and everything, but they don't understand. They literally lost their voice in this election.
Yeah.
Literally, they didn't get to choose who's running for them. They were told who's running for them. Mm-hmm. And we see this happening all the time. And we see it happening on both sides where we don't feel like we're being heard anymore. The special interests are being heard, but the people aren't.
Yeah, and believe it or not, as I go door to door and I talk to Democrats as well as Republicans alike, I hear more and more Democrats saying, we're done drinking the Kool-Aid. What they did with this presidential election has really woken up some people. And now even they're beginning to realize, our voices aren't being heard. Things are being decided whether we have a say in it or not. And, I think, and I'm hoping that people finally, it's been a call to action, that they go ahead and they demand for their voice to be heard, and they stop allowing our freedoms and our rights to be stripped away from us.
No, I honestly hope so. I hope this does wake up a lot of people. And the thing is we could have been in a very similar boat with the Republican Party too, with the attempted assassination on Donald Trump.
Yeah,
I'm sure the Republicans would have done very similar to the same type of move that they did with Harris. And that's, I understand it's a short time till the election, but that is not right. The people should be making that decision, not a party.
And I feel like there's a difference between the two. One is something that was unexpected. Nobody expected that he was shot at. It's horrible to think that they did not take the precautions that they needed. The other one, a reasonable person might say that something like this was calculated, because there has never been where there is a presidential debate this far before the convention.
Right.
And so, whether it's conspiracy theory or not, there is a lot of talk about, was this planned? Did we have to prove in front of the people that he lacked mental capacity? Because the media seemed to jump on this very quickly. They seem to have everything in place really quick.
They knew ahead of time that he lacked mental capacity.
Well, there should be a 25th Amendment used against him if he's not good enough to be able to run because of his mental capacity. If he's not capable of being charged with the crime, which he did commit, which is having classified documents for 40 years, if he's not able to stand trial on that and be convicted, then why is he in office when we know he's only working part-time from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m., 5 days a week? He's a part-time zombie president, which means he should have the 25th against him. But let me ask a question, Lisa, because I am familiar. As many people know, I did live in Broome County. I've run for both congressional office as well as local office on the state level in Broome County in the past. So I'm familiar with the area. And I know Assemblywoman Donna Lepardo personally. I've spoken with her personally as well as professionally many years. But I asked her a question once, and I want to ask you that same question to see the difference. People can look this up. I spoke in 2018 with Donna Lepardo about the red flag law of New York. Now, she supported that bill, and she supported both times in all of the writing. And she admitted in interview with me live that she supported the red flag laws, even though she knew that it would not stop any of the mass shootings or any other gun crimes in New York State, because that's not what the bill was written for. She recognized that it would infringe on gun owners' rights. She admitted this herself, and I have that recording. So I would ask you, do you stand for red flag laws? And if not, why?
Okay, so there is a huge concern I have with a lot of these laws that have been passed through that I think actually takes away from our liberties, and it actually balances, things are always supposed to balance between public safety and personal freedoms. But that's not the case. And we've been seeing that more and more with not only the red flag laws, but we've been seeing it with a lot of things, the bail reform and so forth, where things have tipped so much in the favor of people who have committed crimes or accused of committing crimes, and not toward the law-abiding citizens. When you look at the assembly for this past year, you will see that there were 134 bills that had to do with firearms. 134. A lot of them are repeat ones. They just change the rules a little bit, hoping that something will go through. Almost 100% of them are to take away the rights of law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. And some of them are really concerning. I mean, we have some that go ahead and say, what we're going to go ahead and do is that if you want to register to get a gun, that you have to take a mental test. And if you fail this test, you don't get to have a gun, and we take away your other guns. They do not mention in the law who it is that does the testing, what type of questions it is, and so forth. So, and there's ones with school that we will go ahead and have classes where they will teach about gun violence. I was a teacher, and I taught gang kids in Long Island for a while in the high school level. There's a lot more violence when it comes to things such as rape and physical assault than there ever will be with guns. So when they're talking about this, they aren't talking about, let's go ahead and teach about violence in the schools. They're specifically talking about gun violence. And if you're talking about, somebody who might be an instructor with guns, who could talk about safety and so forth, that's one thing. They don't specifically say who it's going to be. So who knows what their agenda is on that. To me, all of this is just a way of stripping away our Second Amendment rights and our right to protect ourselves. I feel that little by little, all of us are becoming, we're on different registries, so that way our state could go ahead and keep track of us. I know before we actually went live, we were talking about that in detail when it came to things other than with guns. We were talking about when it comes to political contributions and so forth. So I am against anything that goes ahead and limits us on our rights and our freedoms, and anything that tips the scales against people who are law-abiding citizens, people who have the right to protect themselves.
Okay.
Just on and an aside, and then I know I'm being a little bit long and I'm going off track a little bit, but one of the other things that is upsetting is, if somebody were to break into my house right now and let's say they tripped on something and hurt themselves in my house, even if they were breaking into the house to harm me, they could go around and sue me for this. It's like, where are we protecting the law-abiding citizens? Where are we making laws that are actually fair and represent the people that it should represent?
Okay. So you answered a lot of things in reference to the Second Amendment, and I thank you for that. I think it kind of answers the question, but it doesn't quite. So I do want to ask again and just push back a little bit here. So specifically in reference to the red flag laws, which is something that we know we have on record from your opponent. So I want to be very clear about your position since it is a direct comparison.
Yeah.
In reference to the red flag laws, do you support them in some part or at all, or do you reject them in some part or at all?
Well, it starts right off. And if I remember correctly, the exact wording, I believe in the first paragraph, it says that it can do this without any due process. So right there and then when you hear those wordings, it doesn't matter what follows after that. Once somebody is restricted on due process laws, it's not something I'm going to go ahead and support.
Okay. I thank you for that. I understood it from what you were saying, but it is something to get it specifically on the record since I did insist that and get that on the record from your opponent.
And, if you don't mind, I just also want to, as long as we're talking about things like this, there's been a lot that has really been tipping the scales the wrong way, as far as I believe. So we have the Sixth Amendment. And do any of you know what the Sixth Amendment guarantees us? About the right to bear witness, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure you were asking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I didn't direct it to anybody.
I thought it was rhetorical.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So it's the right to go ahead and see who it is who's bearing witness against you. It's absolutely important, right? Because we've got to balance the rights.
Right.
So, for example, Donna went ahead and she sponsored a bill, which is law right now. I had to check with the different police stations on this to make sure. But what it says is, so let's say somebody comes to my house and they do everything heinously possible to me. And Michael, let's say you go ahead and you see this happening. You're my next door neighbor. You see it. Who are you going to call to help me?
You shouldn't be calling the police.
Absolutely. You're going to call the police, right? So the police are going to come. They're going to go ahead and arrest this guy. He's going to be ticketed. He's going to be released. So 35 days after he is released, he is given your name and your home address. So his trial may not be for months and months and months, but he is given your name and your home address while he's walking around free. So I understand about the Sixth Amendment, absolutely critically important, but that's when you're in a safe environment, not when somebody's walking around free and they know, Michael, that you stand between them being going to jail possibly for a very long time and them walking free. That puts the witnesses at risk. Now, the police, and I've talked to the police about this as well, if the police come while the crime is still being committed, they technically are a witness, in which case that person can also get the police officer's home address as well. Then on top of it, the person who is accused of the crime, all they have to say to their lawyer is, you know what? I don't remember doing that to Lisa. I really need to get into her house and talk to her. So his lawyer will go ahead and do a motion, get the right to come into my house. He would be, of course, coming in with his lawyer, and he can question me and he can walk around. So he could say, you know, Lisa, what did I do first? Did I stab you? Where did I stab you? Were you scared? So now we're making people who are victims suffering this twice. We're giving them, where they become the victim twice. So in some cases where they're saying that the crime rate has gone down, has it really? Or is it the fact that people are afraid to be witnesses to a crime anymore and victims are afraid to report it?
So I think it's more of the latter. And you brought it up. Okay, Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously asserted by law, and to be informed of the nature, causes, and of the accusation, and to be confronted with the witnesses against him. It doesn't say anything about being confronted before the trial. Okay, so he doesn't have. They don't have a right to know those witnesses ahead of the trial.
But they do in New York now, because that is the law in New York.
Well, you're speaking specifically about the criminal justice reforms that were passed through New York State, most of them coming in 2019, 2020, 2021. And we have seen that there is a high level of recidivism amongst a small segment. About 12% of those who have been arrested have committed multiple crimes. And when I say multiple, we mean in the order of about 6 to 15 times, repeating their crimes, including threatening witnesses that have seen those crimes. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying you're against the bail reform that has allowed what some have referred to as a revolving door that we have seen for these repeat crimes, and you would seek to try and remove that or strike that from the law if you were to be elected. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, even Isaac Rodriguez, he committed 55 more crimes by the time he went to trial for his first crime. And one of them, he did it with a gang and he left the person for dead. So yeah, the numbers are really high. And this idea, when they started with the ticket and release, they said, it was only going to be, misdemeanors. We found out it wasn't that case. We know in Buffalo, for example, so I'll pick different parts of the state. We know in Buffalo, for example, there was a woman whose boyfriend had beat her up horribly. He was ticketed and released and immediately went and killed her in front of her kids. We know about, like I said, Isaac Rodriguez, so that's downstate. And even right around here, if it wasn't for federal law, do you remember the gentleman who said that he was going to rape and murder all the Jewish female students? And we would not have been able to hold him because of New York law. Thankfully, they took it up a notch, and now he's still in Broome County Jail. So yeah, absolutely. This puts us all law-abiding citizens at risk.
Now, I want to circle back.
Well, before you do, I do want to send the incident she was citing was at Cornell University, where one of the students is a self-professed and self-admitted member of Hamas, and he, after October 7th, was intimidating and verbally attacking students on the Cornell University campus, which is in central New York. I just wanted to make sure, in case people wanted to look at that, you are citing an actual case. It's not something in general. But go ahead.
Absolutely.
Now, like I said, I want to circle back just a little bit. Okay. Because Lisa, you brought up some great points about what's been going on with bail reform and so forth, and about how the accused has been able to get addresses and so forth of witnesses against them. But that doesn't apply if red flag laws are enacted. If a red flag law is initiated or a red flag warrant is issued, it can be done completely anonymously. You will never know who issued it.
Yeah. So there is no due process whatsoever in a red flag. What they call due process is just a process.
Yeah.
It is not. It is not actually due process.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning about anytime you see something that denies you due process. The other thing, just to switch gears a little bit, another thing that completely denies people the right to due process is Rule 213. So, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with that rule or not. But
you have something to bring up?
Yeah, so that's something that New York State came up with during COVID. Basically, said it's about quarantine camps. So we always had where it was, if somebody has something that's contagious, you always have to balance things. That's what it's supposed to be about. You never want to take anybody's away their rights and freedoms, to the extreme. You want to always balance between public safety and public health and people's rights and freedoms. So we've always had rules about if somebody is contagious. And the rules always said that if a doctor finds that somebody has something where they are contagious, so it's a definite, they are contagious, that them walking around produces a great risk to a great number of people at a severe level, then they're going to be asked to isolate, whether it's in their home or if they have to go to a hospital, whatever it is. So New York State went ahead and changed that up, and they came up with Rule 213. So with 213, what they said is instead of a doctor, they would use the commissioner of health or director of health. So who goes ahead and appoints that person?
Governor.
Very good. So
Yeah,
the
I know
governor.
the bill.
So now we're talking about, we're taking it into the political realm, right? And according to Rule 213, it says that he just has to believe that there might be. So now we have two uncertainties. He just has to believe that there might be a case where somebody could be contagious, in which case they can go ahead and mandate that the person is quarantined. So when the person is quarantined, there is no set time, although that they say that there is. Bobby and Cox, who is an attorney who has been spearheading this, has looked into this. And they are said that they are given due process, but there is no set time on when that happens. So somebody could be where they have to be quarantined in their home, or they could be quarantined in a different building. And it may take, a day, it could be immediately, or it could be months before they are actually given any due process type of rights where they're able to talk to an attorney or anything like that. So that is a huge concern, because what is to stop them from doing that to the average citizen who disagrees with something that the government says, or let's say it's a political candidate that they want to go ahead and silence? They could keep somebody in there indefinitely. And again, you do not need to prove that the person has something. You just have to believe that they do. Bobby and Cox and different people had tried to get this struck down. It went to the appeals court. And who is it who selects all the appellate judges?
Generally, it's going to be the governor again.
Yes, it is. So when it went there, they said, no, this is absolutely fine. They did not see a problem with that. I do see a problem with that, because anytime you're taking away somebody's due process rights, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah. We've actually covered this bill when it first was being proposed in 2019, and then it came back in 2020. It was actually initially first put out, I believe the representative was from Queens who first issued it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in 2019, came back in 2020, which was when it was passed. We talked about it on this program, as well as I also spoke about it on my own. So we are very familiar with this. And the worst part is there is an indefinite time period in which you would be forced into this quarantine.
Right.
Again, it's under the precepts, the presupposition.
According to their definition. Okay. Let me get back up here to where it's at.
You guys are quick with finding all this information.
That's why I remember.
That's our specialty, actually.
I actually just remember the bill because I did cover it.
Okay.
And I have a pretty good memory of it. I know Mike's looking for the exact
So
definition.
isolation shall mean physical separation and confinement of any individual or group of individuals who are infected or reasonably determined by the state commissioner of health or local health authority to be infected with highly contagious disease organism, blah, blah, blah.
So your county health department could roll by your house and just be like, oh, that guy looks sick. Hey, you're quarantined.
Right.
Yeah.
Theoretically, it's ripe for corruption because there is no actual basis to start the process, and there's no end to the process that's defined, and and much like red flag laws, there's no clear delineation of due process.
And here's the thing: a definition of a case is changed. Diagnosis may be based, and they're dropping the word solely, on clinical judgment. And they added in signs and symptoms combined with known exposure based on best available evidence of transmissibility to a case or suspected case, and or on laboratory evidence as applicable.
Yep.
Okay. So they don't have to prove that you
Yeah.
have something.
So let's say
Have
Hoka
faded.
she's got an opponent who's doing really well. She can't keep up with the person with debates and so forth. What's to say that that person isn't put into some type of isolation because of the belief that they may have something?
And they also are given by this rule. What I thought was interesting is enforcement. So whenever a person, if you can read it on the screen here, whenever a person is subject to an isolation or quarantine order, the state department of health or a local health authority, so that would be your county health officer, or the local health authority at the state department of health's direction, shall consistent with any direction issued by the state commissioner of health. So these are all political positions.
Mhm.
Monitor such person to ensure compliance with the order and determine whether such person requires a higher level of medical care. So in that, it sounds great. Like, oh, if I'm really sick, they're going to move me to another facility where they can take care of me, or they can disappear you. So if it's not enough that they can keep you at your home quarantined, if you still make a nuisance of yourself, they can move you without your permission to a higher level of medical care and disappear you.
Yep.
And
And
basically,
they can also mandate what you have to do in order to get out. You know, we took away religious exemptions when it comes to vaccines. You know, it's possible that they could say you have to take this, this, and this in order to get out. And that is a real concern because, for example, with the COVID vaccines, only when Johnson came out with their vaccine, that was the only vaccine that did not have any soy in it. I know my daughter is Anna for soy protein and soy lecithin. So if she only had the first two choices, she didn't have Johnson. And if it was mandated in order for her to keep her job that she had to get a vaccine, that would have put her at great risk. So, you know, we're taking away and creating a lot of concern when it comes to people's rights, their liberties, and even their health because of what the state thinks is best for us.
Yeah.
I wanted to take a moment because I know, and I'm happy to speak with you, Lisa. We're covering a lot of information here, but at the same time, I did want to mention, and people may have noticed, that Keith Bombach, is it Bamba or Bumball?
Bomba, like the song, sir.
Bamba. Okay, I thought so. Of B.O.S. Locke has joined us. He's in, as well as Frank Johnson, one of the co-owners and co-founders of the Liberty First Foundation. So we have a couple of people here with us, and definitely, Keith, feel free to jump on in. We're kind of informal here. Since we have so many individuals very familiar with the Second Amendment, and we were talking about it, obviously there's breaking news today. There was a mass shooting in Georgia. We know 4 individuals did die, 2 teachers, 2 students. It was at a school, and the alleged perpetrator at this time is believed to be a 14-year-old child who was taken alive after this event.
And I do want to point out for everyone who's on here, as well as everyone who's listening, there is a very key point that I'm sure depending on what organizations you listen to for media, they won't talk about. But once again, this was an active shooter that was stopped, and this time preventing the 14-year-old from being shot, but was stopped with a good guy, or in this case, a school resource officer with a firearm.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know there's been in the past couple of years talks about removing armed officers or resource officers from schools. And I think this is a case in point that should be pointed out, that in this case, how many more lives were saved because there was somebody with a firearm able to intervene without having to wait for a full police response.
Actually,
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
Kamala Harris in 2019 actually was one of those individuals saying that we have to remove in
Yes,
Georgia.
sir.
She was in
Yes,
Georgia,
sir.
2019, for her 2020 presidential attempt, and stated that she wanted to remove school resource officers, calling them part of a prison complex for our kids. Imagine if there was even less protection. If Georgia had listened to her, if she had taken office and would have forced that on them, who would have protected the rest of the students from this 14-year-old? But I wanted to ask both Lisa and Keith about this, because we're hearing the argument again, as we often do, that The problem is the firearm, but yet there is no solution other than disarm everyone.
Guns.
Of course,
Take
by
guns.
definition, that doesn't prevent criminals who, by definition, break the law. And so I would say
That's important. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
no. I was just going to ask, what's your counter to that? Keith, we'll start with you since you work in the field, and then I'd ask Lisa for your thoughts about it from a more political perspective.
I think it's important for us to delineate between those two categories, which you sort of outlined, right? The first one is, okay, there are criminals, people who should not have firearms, who legally aren't allowed to have firearms, or doing illegal activities with them. And completely from the perspective of the problems that the Second Amendment community is trying to solve and fix from within, as well as the very oftentimes the premise of when we're encountering an active shooter, right? Separate that out from the problems that the community itself can resolve, right? I think we all agree that the firearm itself is an inanimate object. It's a tool. It's not jumping up and deciding to shoot people on its own. I think everyone on this podcast will agree that the gun itself is not the problem. The problem is the people behind the firearm. I think where the community ourselves, and I probably will get a little pushback from some people on this, but where I would say the Second Amendment community can be better is on aspects of being responsible for that firearm, being responsible for our firearms, to ensure that if you're an adult who owns that firearm, to ensure, like in this case, where did this 14-year-old child who shot 2 teachers and shot 2 other students, where did that firearm come from? Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't an FFL.
No, I just want to clarify the law. It was illegal for a 14-year-old to be able to have that firearm in Georgia. So the question of, we'll make a law, he broke law. So
exactly. And that's sort of part of the thing is like, you know, and I can only speak for myself, but as a concealed carry holder and someone who carries all the time, why do we carry? And it's to protect, in my view, is to protect the people we love, protect ourselves, and protect people who can't protect themselves, right? To stop bad things from happening to good people. Yet we don't ever apply that to when the firearm, we always think about the scenarios. Okay, there's an active shooter. Someone goes into a school where, you know, in a grocery store or a bank, and somebody comes along. But what about the scenarios when the firearm's not on us? What about when that firearm is sitting in your nightstand, sitting at home? And those are the scenarios that I think that amongst ourselves, we have to ask some very hard questions. Because once again, we're seeing a scenario where this most likely, I mean, granted, we don't have all the facts yet, but most likely could have been prevented if this 14-year-old hadn't had access. And, you know, I'm not, and once again, I will say this, I am not for any buybacks or any of that nonsense at all. You know, I mean, if you can't see over my shoulder, I think we all know what that flag stands for, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's, but I do think we can be better and try to, you know, bring back education, bring back teaching people about firearms, bring back the element of people understanding and children understanding that these aren't toys. These are tools that are meant to do a very specific job. And there are some very serious ramifications if they're not treated as such. At least that's how I was raised. That's how others were raised, you know,
Right.
And I don't think that's happening today. You know, you've got kids learning about firearms from Call of Duty and John Wick, you know, and we wonder where there's a problem, right? So I think there's a lot that needs to be done from our own standpoint of educating, training, and, you know, tool implementation, if that's the right course of action for some people.
Right, well, Keith,
Okay.
I'm going to jump in just to
sure.
follow up. Yeah, I've been waiting a while. I've been actually sitting
Of
here,
course.
probably seeing me stuffing my face full of pizza. I was under the impression the show started tonight at 8. So
I was as well. So.
I was still preparing dinner at 7:05. You know, we talk a lot in the Second Amendment community about the responsibility of us owners to safeguard and safekeep our firearms to prevent things like this from happening. We talk a lot in this community, especially from a pro-Second Amendment standpoint, how we would like to institute programs to better equip children with the knowledge of what firearms do, how they operate, and how dangerous they can be if used incorrectly or used maliciously. The problem is we have all gone to the end of that pier, yelling and screaming our heads off, saying, we would like to bring these programs back into the community. But from a political standpoint, we get nothing but pushback.
Mhm.
We attempt every single day to try and bring firearm education into the classroom. We try to bring it into after-school programs. We try to bring it into the Boy Scouts, into the Girl Scouts, into the 4-H, into every organization that's out there. We try. We talk to it blue in the face about saying, we are not trying to give your kid a lesson in how to kill. We're trying to give your children a lesson in how to live.
Mhm.
We're trying to give your children a lesson in how to survive, how to respect life, how to preserve life, how to protect yourself, protect your loved ones. Even we're not looking to tell your kid, hey, all right, listen, as soon as you're 21, we're going to put a gun on your hip. That's not the case. But there's a lot of 9 and 10-year-olds out there that if they find a gun in the bushes at the park when they're playing, they wind up shooting somebody because they don't know, a hill of beans about how the thing operates. But we get the political class in this country is so hell-bent on the idea that if you are pro-Second Amendment, that you're pro-killing.
Mhm.
But that's not the case. We are pro-preserving life. Now, I have said 1,000 times on this platform and other platforms as well, that the left in this country, they love nothing more than to see the title Dead Children. They stand on the graves of the dead children. They deal in the blood of children all day long to push a radical agenda. Believe me, David Hogg right now is sitting behind his keyboard thinking about how much more money he can grift with his next tweet about gun control because some children died today. But if the school that we were looking at today, and it's probably going to come out at some point, if the school had followed certain protocols, this would have been avoided. If the
Well, they got
parents,
called earlier.
right, well, if the parents
They
had
had a
followed
call.
certain protocols, this would have been avoided. There's protocols in place, but the political will to enforce the protocols and to teach gun safety is so great because they would rather deal with living and looking at dead children than figuring out a way how to prevent it from happening. Because if it doesn't happen, we take an arrow out of their quiver, and that's one less thing that they can hold over us, one less thing they could use to try to control us, because their greatest wish is twofold: silence us and disarm us. And they
Mhm.
can't silence us if we're armed. So that's the number one thing. We can talk all we want, come up with every single suggestion on how to make the world a utopia that we all would love it to be. But as long as we're armed, we'll never have the opportunity, because as long as we have our guns, they want to shut us down, keep us down, and it doesn't matter to them how many children have to die in order for them to get their wish. How many children did Mao kill? How many children did Pol Pot kill? Stalin. Every one of these leaders around the world, they didn't give a damn how many children died so long as they got their mission complete. And that's what the political left in this country is doing now. And there's very few people who are willing to call them out on the carpet and tell them straight to your face, there's nothing more that you love than dead children.
Well, I will almost guarantee that this was not done with a quote unquote assault rifle.
Yeah.
Because I've looked at several reports on it, and I guarantee if it would have been an AR or an AK or something,
It would have led the
it would have
story.
been first thing.
It would have led the story.
Nothing's identifying the weapon use.
But it didn't prevent Cammie from going out there today and yelling and screaming first words out of her mouth about how we have to collect all the assault weapons.
Yeah.
What was your thought, Lisa?
And Keith, you both have, given great answers about this, and I just wanted to add a little bit about this when you were talking about education. Absolutely, education is so critically important to teach people to be responsible with guns. And Keith, when you were mentioning about, the people who are criminals are always going to find guns. So, trying to get rid of guns is a horrible idea. As I mentioned before, 100% for the Second Amendment. The thing that is important that you mentioned, Frank, when you were talking about anything you try to do to educate people seems to be taken away from them. Well, one of the bills, when I was talking about bills earlier that was on the floor with the Assembly and the Senate, one of the bills that was on there was to raise the age for children to be able to attend gun shows with their parents. Now, do either one of you remember the first time you ever went to a gun show? And, you go with your parent, you learn a lot about guns, about the safety of guns, responsibility of guns. It's important to start this, at a certain age. They're considering that 14 is too young to go ahead and be in a gun show and learn about things with your parents. So any opportunity you have for education, they take away.
Well,
I was 12.
Lisa, as a native New Yorker, I can speak to this about the ridiculousness of gun laws in New York. In New York, if you have a child, you can take your child to the range, you can take your child hunting, you can do whatever you want, and a child will be allowed to handle a handgun from the age of 13 up until the day before his or her 21st birthday, as long as they're with an adult supervising who's licensed to own that particular firearm. So we'll allow children to handle the guns, and I think that's great. You talk about gun shows. My first gun show was about 12 minutes after I got out of the hospital when I was born. I lived in the gun. This is my life. But the ridiculousness of New York is that as soon as you're 21, you are not allowed in the state of New York to even handle a pistol unless you're licensed to do so. So you've now got to go through all these hoops and bells and whistles, the cost, the background checks, all of this stuff. And New York is not making it easier. Now they have a 2-day class for your back, to get your license and everything. Now the cost is upwards of $500 to get a pistol license in New York. What about all the people that are not economically prepared to spend that kind of money for something they might not even want in the long term? If you tell somebody that 21 years old, you can't shoot a gun, okay, you can't fire a handgun, but they think they might want one. Now you're going to make them spend all this time, all this money, all this background check, everything else, go to an FFL, buy the firearm, which they can't possess. They have to send the paperwork to the state and have the state send it back and have it come back. And the person gets the firearm in their possession. They go to the range the first day, they shoot it, and they go, I really don't like this. That's their prerogative. But you just cost them 6 months of their life and $1,000 for them to make that discovery. Why? Because you won't allow people to go to the range with a friend and teach them how to properly handle a firearm. You won't allow these people to take a gun safety class in New York. You won't allow them to do any of this stuff in New York. And then they wonder why things go south. New York has the most ass-backwards laws when it comes to firearms.
Yeah.
And it just seems to keep getting worse. Every time we get a decision on the positive side from the Supreme Court, whether it was Heller, whether it was Bruin, or whatever it is, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York, every time we get a positive result from the Supreme Court, New York seems to figure out a way how to circumvent it and make it worse.
It gets even crazier when you realize that you're not even at this point now. I tried to go into an FFL to look at a semi-automatic long gun. I'm not allowed to handle a semi-automatic long gun without a pistol permit because the action is semi-automatic.
Yeah, the most popular rifle in America outside of the AR-15 is the Ruger 1022.
Yeah.
This rifle has been in production for over 45 years. It's the most prolific rifle on the face of the planet. More people own 1022s than own handguns. They own that more than they own AR-15s. It is the most versatile learning tool in the firearm community. It's the least expensive firearm. They're $169. You can go and buy one of them. But now it's going to cost you $700 to buy it because you got to spend $500 on a permit and $200 on a safety class before you can get a rifle to go plinking.
Yeah.
I've got 9 10/22s right here behind me on my shelf. I got 9 of them. I didn't have to do a background check, do anything for a single one of them. And now they're saying you have to get all this rigmarole. Oh, and then now you carry a firearm. Now you're limited to 9 rounds in your firearm. You have a Glock that has a 10-round magazine. You're only allowed to have 1 in the chamber and 9 in the magazine.
So Lisa, when you're walking around and you're talking to your constituents, your prospective constituents, but hopefully your constituents, what is their feeling about this? Like when it comes to the Second Amendment and firearm ownership, because New York tends to lean more towards the disarmament camp when it comes to urban areas, like where your district is largely located. What do they say to you if you broach the subject of the Second Amendment?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends mostly on the political party, because I find that when I go to most homes, whether conservatives or Republicans, they absolutely understand the need for the Second Amendment and what type of risk we'd be at if that is ever compromised, which it is all the time. You know, they're trying to take it totally away from us. When I go to some of the homes where it might be progressives and working families, you know, and I hate to do this along party lines, but I do find where there's a greater majority of the people who think that somehow that the gun fires itself. And I loved, Keith, when you brought up the fact that, you know, if it wasn't for somebody with a gun, we wouldn't have been able to stop the shooting. Because I remember when Trump was shot at, and when he was shot, the news media was all saying this is why we shouldn't have guns. Well, if we didn't have guns, how would we have stopped the shooter? You know, and people don't actually put it into that perspective. But
agree with
to be honest with you, even when I do bring up the subject, a lot of people don't feel comfortable talking about it. And this is kind of a sad commentary I'm seeing in a lot of homes. A lot of people are afraid to, for example, just sign petitions because they're afraid that they're being tracked by the government. They're afraid to talk about controversial subjects because they're afraid of being tracked by the government or about what people are going to say. You know, I've had so many people say, I've had friends, you know, who stopped being friends with me if they found out how I really believe on a subject. And that's sad, because we grew up in an America where everybody wanted to hear different opinions. It's diverse opinions that bring us to a better America. We don't want to just hear our own voices. We want to find out how to get to the next level. And somehow we've lost that art.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. In truth, part of the problems that we're facing, I think, are our own making, in the fact that, conservatives and liberals, or left and right, we've gotten to a point where we won't talk at all, right? Or we can't even have a dialogue at all. And I think that is sort of the foundation of so much of the problem. I mean, if you look at the fact of, let's leave out all the suicides and all the gun violence and just focus on, that age group of 17 and under. There should not be, in my view, at least this is my opinion, that's not a partisan issue, right?
Yeah.
We can disagree on how you solve it, right? But when you have 14-year-olds thinking it's okay to go into school and shoot other children and teachers, there's something fundamentally wrong that we need to come together and discuss. There's something, it's a much bigger issue. We have to look at mental health. We have to look at the systems of why this is happening. And we can't say, I think we can, at least for ourselves in the gun community, have to say, listen, this is no longer just pointing the finger at one person saying this is the one time out. It's happening often enough that we need to try to fix it ourselves in some way, shape, or form. Right. Whether that's through things like the Eddie Eagle program, which is a much younger age group than we're talking about, right? Or through, better training, education tools for parents, right?
Yeah, there's Project Child Safe, there's Eddie Eagle, there's a program that Michael Marshall and I are trying to institute to try and bring, gun education back into classrooms and stuff like that. We've got a couple of business, gun manufacturers who are going to try and help us with that too. But you talk about the mental illness side of things, and I'm gonna give you a very rude awakening. when it comes to that. Look at the state of affairs that we're in right now. And I'm not going to cast aspersions on anybody's lifestyles or anything else like that. But we are so politically sensitized to being able to look at mental illness and call it for what it is, that we don't put any public resources into mental illness treatments anymore. We've closed down hundreds of facilities where people used to go and get help, and we don't have it anymore. We have resources in schools being taken away, and we have people that are acknowledging, accepting, and promoting mental illness in this country as a rule of law. And you don't need to look any further than Ireland. You don't have to look any further than Canada. You don't have to look any further than England. When you see teachers being incarcerated because they won't adopt a certain political ideology as far as mental welfare, they refuse to believe that something is normal when it isn't, and they're being punished for it. And then when we want to address mental illness in this country, and we say, okay, listen, there's obviously something going on with this generation of children over the last 20 some odd years that has elevated the shooting scenarios, because we didn't have this crap in the 70s and 80s.
No.
Very frequently do we have this in the 90s. I mean, yeah, we had gang fights and all kinds of stuff like that in school, but we didn't have this kind of thing happening. Whatever it is that's happening, we are not even allowed to address it, because God forbid you step on somebody's trigger word. You're a bigot. You're a phobe. You're this. You're that.
Fact of Frank. That ties back into the fact of, we're not having open discourse and dialogue like we are tonight.
Well, that's the thing, is that when we do try to have the open discourse, the open dialogue, we are not even allowed to get to the point where you can say, I mean, you remember the Joan Rivers show on TV? Her line, he opened up, said, "Can we talk?" You can't. Right. You can't even ask the question, "Can we talk?" Because it's like, well, who's we?
Speaking of questions, Mike, what do you got?
It's horrific what's going on. And we're not going to be able to address these things until people start to have a little bit of a smack of reality. And unfortunately, a lot of the people in this country just will not understand things are bad. And if you don't confront it, if you don't confront it head on and you keep dancing around it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it loses control. And that's what we get.
And the problem is, a lot of people are ignoring this as well. I'm so sorry, Mike. I just wanted to say this real quick. I had a woman who came to my house who had over 300 signatures of parents who were all concerned because of gang activity that is going on in the school here locally. And she said one of her kids is dropping out of school because he's afraid for his safety. She has another one that has severe depression, is thinking about, she's afraid that the child may become suicidal because there is such a fear in the schools. And she says that it seems to be ignored. So I went to the Board of Education to talk to them about it, to say, she has over 300 signatures. And whether you're doing something right now, you're planning to do something, whatever, she's got the voice of all those people that she's standing on. They have real concerns. You can't bury your head about this. You have to talk about it. And nobody did anything. The woman came back to my house like weeks later, almost a month later. She said, nobody got back to me. So I contacted them again. And the response was, well, we're not going to do anything until we can thoroughly research and investigate the person who has got all the signatures. I'm like, what is that about?
It's guardrail politics. You know what guardrail politics are? Have you ever heard that term?
No.
All right, it was a term coined in New York City. Wherever you had a dangerous curve, and the residents would say, "Hey, listen, 3 times a week I got a car coming off the street and running through my front yard, knocking my fence down, hitting my lawn furniture. Is there any way we can get a guardrail put up?" the city would tell you, we can't put up a guardrail until there's a fatality.
Mhm.
They wait for the absolute worst set of conditions before they address it, because at that point, the elephant in the room is too big to ignore. But until then, they're just going to keep ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it, because it's going to divert resources away from one of their own pet projects. And they won't allow that to happen.
And that's so wrong. I know that I used to teach economics in Long Island, and most of my kids were Bloods and the Crips, and we had a huge gang problem in Long Island. And because of that, the school used to always have where they brought in different people who were experts on, mental health, gun control, all these other things to look for. And it was always available for the training for the teachers as well as the parents and the students. And it was always free. And it's because they wanted to be, proactive, and they also wanted to cut back on what they're already seeing. And that's the way it should be. You don't bury your head in the sand. You don't ignore people, and you don't make people feel that they have to be investigated and researched in order to have a voice.
I want to bring up something.
Before you do that, let Voss go.
Actually, the one thing I've been waiting for is I want to give a chance for our guest Keith Bombach to get a chance to introduce himself and his company, what he does, because I know we jumped in with both feet. I mean, there's a lot happening today and a lot of emotions throughout the entire country, but I did want to give him a couple minutes here just to introduce yourself, Keith, as we're continuing the conversation. So please take a moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. So my name is Keith Bombach. I'm a founder of B.O.S Lock, or Biometric Optimized Safety. What we basically did was in 2020, when my first nephews were born, saw a problem with firearm safety. I was unhappy with lock boxes, unhappy with the safety systems that allowed for rapid access for firearms around my home. Whether that's your desk gun, your firearm that's sitting on top of your fridge, nightstand gun,
shower gun.
What I mean,
shower gun,
bathroom gun, I'm sure now if anyone on the left is now fully, thank God I live in Florida, so I don't have to worry about the red flag laws, of some of these other states. But no, in all seriousness, what we wanted to do is provide a tool for gun owners and parents who have children around, and be able to give them speed of access while still having the confidence and capability, Because if we look at the fundamental problem that oftentimes is allowing young children to have access, it's due to the fact that, firearms owners are forced to choose between having speed of access or proper responsible gun ownership, in which, when I say that, I mean, when the firearm's not directly in your possession and under your control, is that firearm accessible to the children in the home? And if the answer to that is yes, it's accessible when it's not on you, under your control, well, then I think there's a fundamental problem. I'm not one to tell everyone how to live their life. I just think that we need to have a tool provided out there for parents to give them greater options. And that's ultimately what we tried to do. We've gotten some pushback online about people saying, oh, this is terrible. This is, this is going to be something from the far, try to take our rights away. I'm like, that's not it at all. Listen, everyone's got their life. No one knows their life and what's best for their life other than the person who's living it, No one knows your shoes, the shoes that you've walked in, But at the same time, we need to provide tools, scenarios, and solutions for people to be able to make the right choice. You go to shop for a car right now, you've got hundreds of choices, Yeah. Hundreds of high quality choices, from luxury to trucks to, But why, when it comes to safety, do we still only have 3 systems? Why is that it? Why have we not pushed and innovated? And that's sort of what led us to the question of, can we do find a better solution? Ultimately, what we ended up creating was a product that attaches to your firearm, allows you to be completely safe, secure, keeps the firearm's chamber empty and unloaded, but then in 0.46 seconds allows you to go from secure, unloaded to rounds on target. And to me, that's sort of that's our way of having that solution. Yes. Did we also go ahead and get a California Department of Justice firearm safety device certified? Yes, we did that as well. So there's a lot of benefits to it. But ultimately what our real goal is to provide responsible gun owning parents a tool that basically essentially gives them the freedom and takes away that peace of mind, or gives them a freedom and allows them to have the peace of mind without taking away their ability to protect and their capability, right? But it's only one factor of the problem, right?
Right.
It's a tool for parents. The issues that we're facing are bigger, right? It takes hard conversations. It takes educating children from a young age, right? Because the threats a parent has as a gun owning parent from the age of 0 to 5 are very different than the parent has from 15 to 17 or 14 to 17. And we have to be aware of all that, right? That's where something like Eddie Eagle comes in, right? Where you can teach, the children, listen, if you see a gun, go find an adult, and then as it gets older, right, teaching about how to responsibly handle a firearm, taking away this taboo nature of guns and gun culture, right? Parents need to be able to talk with their kids about having a firearm and what it is and how they can, be responsible with it. And if we bring those things back, we hopefully can begin to cut into some of the issues that we're facing and seeing every single time you turn on the news.
Yeah, a lot of the problems that we're seeing is because of a collapse of culture, a lack of culture, as opposed to being creative in our options and promoting the education and culture of what used to be commonplace. I mean, you have to think at the founding of our country, when the idea of the frontiersman is out there, your kids are learning how to shoot because that's necessary for survival. Your wife knows how to shoot because it's necessary for survival. Later on, it may not be necessary for survival, but our Constitution still requires every person of age, specifically male, and of weapon-bearing age to be part of the militia. You can't be part of the militia if you don't know how the firearm works, because you're not going to be as the text quotes, a well-regulated militia, not regulated in the sense of the government now, for those folks out there that don't know how to actually speak English, but the well-maintained militia, the well-supplied and trained militia that needs to come to the defense of their property, their community, and their families in times of need when the military is not enough to cut it. That's what we're here for. But we can't do that if we don't have the culture to back it and train our people. And we don't have that right now. All we have now is a culture that has been pressed upon us for the last 50 to 60 years, where we're supposed to be disarmed because we're far too civilized to need weaponry anymore.
You're absolutely correct. Okay. And even if you look at projected future civilizations, we still have armaments.
Yeah.
Of some sort or another.
Tell me, are we
Lisa?
civilized? I was going to say real quick, tell the people in Aurora, Colorado, if they're too civilized to have weaponry.
Yeah. Lisa, I do appreciate you being on the show tonight. I know you have to run. You have some other engagements that you need to take care of. Thank you so much for being on here tonight. I apologize for not getting to the ERA. Getting to the ERA issue tonight, which we'd love to have you back on here. And anytime you want to come back on, you're more than welcome.
I would love that. I really enjoy this, and I am so impressed with this conversation that you all are conducting. I really consider it an honor to have been on the show.
I thank you for coming on, and hopefully your campaign goes really well. For those of you that don't know, 123rd District is Lisa O'Keefe's district that she's trying to run for in the New York Assembly. So that would be Broome County, right? Yes. Does that include any other?
No, it's just Johnson
City. A special cutout.
Okay. And before you leave, how can people support you? Where can they find you?
They could find me on Lisa O'Keefe 123, because the district is 123. So LisaO'Keefe123.com. On there, you'll find a PDF that you can download. It mentions different issues and how I stand on them. What's really important is on the back is my personal cell phone number, because I think it's really important to listen to people. And it's been really great. I have talked to people from all different walks of life with different issues that they have and different ideas. So I welcome anybody to do that, because that's what it's supposed to be about, being the voice of the people.
Now, I know that being the voice of the people also takes financial means. So if someone wants to donate to your campaign, how would they go about doing that?
They can also do that at lisao'keefe123.com. And if it's okay, can I just spend 2 minutes just explaining some new rule on donations?
Go right ahead.
Yep.
So we talk about our rights and our liberties right now. If you are somebody who donates to a campaign, so you're a person, not a PAC, not a corporation, you have to fill out a form that says not only your name and your home address, but your phone number and your email address, then who you work for, what your position is where you work, and what that company is, and they will go ahead and follow up to make sure that that information is correct. So please be aware that when you do different donations, New York State says they do that in order to make sure that the individual is not buying any campaign. Yet again, the PACs and the corporations do not have to do that. And on top of it, if you reach a certain level of contribution, you get up to, if you're running for New York State Assembly, you get up to $175,000 of taxpayer dollars. So you think of how many assembly seats there are, how many people are getting $175,000 to do TV commercials and so forth. If it's Senate, it's almost double that of money, and it keeps going up from there. So that's a lot of money that New York State has come up with to give people running for office rather than for the programs and services that we need, as you were mentioning, like with mental health and so forth, substance abuse, things that we actually need. So I want you all to be aware of that. As much as I need money to run my campaign, I am always transparent, and I want you to know about this because those are a couple things that I'm going to fight to change when I get into office.
Very good.
That seems to be an awful lot of hoops to jump through in order to donate to a campaign.
It's a new thing.
I have a lot of seniors who've only given me $1 and $2, and I have to explain to them that they have to fill it all out, and they get concerned because they don't have email addresses. A lot of these people that I talk to, and my auditor will come back to me and say, ask them again, see if they have an email address. I'm like, they're 90-something years old. They don't have an email address, and I know that I had several people who only donated $5, and they got a follow-up letter from New York State wanting to make sure that all of their information was correct. So what is the true reason why they're being asked, to give not only where they work, but their position at that company?
Yeah,
but how does all this regulation fall in line with being constitutional when it seems that this would have a chilling effect on people participating in the political process?
Absolutely.
Right.
It's meant to be chilling. It's meant to be chilling.
People are really concerned because they feel like, first, now they know, are you supporting a Republican? Are you supporting a Democrat? They know, are you middle class? Because they can look at the job. I had somebody who put down that he was a janitor, and he also put down that he worked at a clothing store just as a cashier. And so they went ahead and they questioned that a lot. They were like, well, which job is his? And I said, well, he filled one out when he was at one place and he did $5. He filled the other one out when he was at the other place and did $2. So he was putting it down based on where he worked. But that's how carefully they're watching. And I think that it's a system of tracking people, what categories they fit into. And the question is, where does that information go from there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how come it seems that all of this can happen to hinder your progress and what you're doing, but we have organizations like Act Blue that seem to run around with absolutely no restrictions.
Yeah.
And I think they'll be looking at you more specifically because you are not part of the Republican or Democrat system per se in this state.
And remember, no ID to vote.
Because Republicans in New York State, and I'm looking at all of you because I know as many of you watch this, you must understand that the Republican Party machine in this state is captured.
Mm-hmm.
It's a captured opposition. It works hand in glove with the Democrats here in this state. And I'm talking about the parties. I'm not talking about necessarily individual people. I'm talking about the parties as a whole.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have candidates that are not part of that system being censored on both sides, you're not getting a fair shake as the voter, and you need to demand better.
Yeah, mine has been 100% a grassroots effort, and I've done that to make sure that people know that I'm not there to represent a party. I'm there to represent the people. I believe in transparency. For too long, our government's become too expansive and too expensive. And it's time we start looking out for what we need over what we want. You know, if you go onto my Facebook page, like Lisa O'Keefe, I always and only talk about issues. I will not go ahead and try to sensationalize anything. I won't try to, you know, scare anybody into anything. I just bring up the facts. And, you know, I'll bring up things like we had $500,000 to see how shrimp react in treadmills, $100,000 for the governor's votes. It's like, why are we doing things like that before we're looking out for what we really need? Why are we giving people who are running for office all of this money when it could be going somewhere else? You know, they say it's to level the playing field, but is it really? Because there's more Democrats that run than Republicans. And then on top of that, if you want to level the playing fields, put caps on how much people have to spend, you know, because I know some people who ran for city council who wound up spending over $100,000, and you don't need to do that. You can walk the neighborhood, talk to people. Michael, you're a great example. I don't know if it's okay to mention, but he ran an amazing campaign. There was not a home that didn't know his name. And what type of budget did you run on?
$2,000.
Yeah. So it's done. If you actually care about the people, you care about the issue, you want to hear their voice, you don't need all of that money. And again, the PACs aren't filling out these forms. The corporations aren't. It's the people who are doing this.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Lisa. I know that you have to go. So we appreciate you very much coming onto the show tonight and answering a lot of our questions and participating in the discussion. And wish you all the best. Hope you come back.
I would love to. Please invite me back. I would love to do that.
Absolutely.
You're welcome anytime, Lisa.
The door's always open and the coffee pot's brewing.
Listening to you, gentlemen, and I really appreciate that, because that's what it's about. It's not about, you know, stopping your learning. Learning is supposed to be a lifelong process, and you want to take ownership for learning, and you only do that from listening to other people and incorporating, and then doing your own research beyond that. So I thank you all.
Have a very good evening.
Thank you, Lisa. Have a great night.
Okay.
She's a nice pip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was awesome having her on tonight.
Yeah, it's always tough running in an election.
It's definitely terrifying hearing some of the policies and regulations that they have. I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh my Lord.
Yeah, New York is
I can't fathom that, you know.
You talk about places like Texas being another country.
Yeah.
New York is like another planet.
I mean, I can't. I mean, because like you read about stuff like that, and you're like, oh well, that's just like a small little, you know, that's something they might do. It's never gonna. And then you hear the real stories, and you're like, I remember why, you know.
Keith, they went through. So there's the medical encampment bill that was going through for 5 years in a row before it finally got passed. The law in New York on bulletproof vest, passive personal protection, a bulletproof vest, which is now illegal in New York State, that went through 4 years, year after year. New York will just continue every year. They'll just resubmit the bill over and over until people forget and it gets passed through.
You see the look on Keith's face. Yes, Keith. In New York, it's illegal for a civilian to own a bulletproof vest.
Soft or hard. Like
because
hard.
You know, New York, you know, with his rise in quote unquote gun violence, the last thing we want you to be able to do is protect yourself from a bullet.
Passively.
You should be running away.
I mean,
duty to retreat.
And I think this is where it ties into, you know, where there's several like talking points to go dive into here. And it's, I think, you know, for the most part, you know, we're looking at is when you try to regulate everyday people's lives by several hundred people in a central location telling everyone how they need to live their lives, it's doomed to failure. Right. And I think that's one of the things our founding fathers had, you know, really identified was that, you know, a decentralized but strong central government, right? Strong in the ability to protect our borders, to, you know, facilitate trade between states being able to regulate themselves, right? And then even down to the localities, right? And the townships, being able to have some control over what's best for their people and the needs in their surrounding areas. Because once again, what upstate New York needs is different than New York City, and what New York City is definitely different than what Texas and Florida need, right? So I can tell you that right now.
Oh, yeah.
But, so I think
Your
that's
state-
part of it, and
your
I think
your state's not passing a law like this one.
no, there'd be hell to pay. Hell will get raised.
Provides that no person shall be denied the equal protection of laws of this state or any subdivision thereof. Provides no person shall, because of race, color, ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, creed, religion, or sex, including sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, pregnancy or pregnancy outcomes, reproductive health care, and autonomy, shall be subject to any discrimination in their civil rights or in it by any other person or by any firm, corporation, or institution, or by the state or any agency or subdivision of the state.
That's the expansion of the EOE, state level EOE rule.
And then here's the other problem I have sometimes when we look at, and this is just once again a personal opinion, of when you look at some of these bills, right? Every single time you read it, it seems like you need a lawyer to tell you what's actually being said.
Of course, you do.
And it's like, no offense, but the average American, just what is the bill about? Like, what was okay? I heard equal rights, civil liberties. That all sounds great, right? That people, it's fair to people, but what is it really? Because there's a loading something in there, right? Because you wouldn't be bringing it up. But I didn't hear right out of the gate anything that was a negative.
No,
Yeah, there is. Because
there's
you didn't actually.
I missed something.
Okay. So, basically, have you ever known of anybody that it was discriminated against because they're pregnant?
I personally haven't. No.
How about, do people talk about having abortions with their employers?
I mean, usually it's not a topic that's brought up at work. I don't think so. But once again,
Well, those are two things that are in this bill.
Okay. I see. And that can all of a sudden become a slippery slope there too, right? Because
Exactly.
okay, now I see. Because when you read it the first time, I'm like, and this is it's a valid point. When you read that quick, it's like, okay, great. We're making things fair for everybody.
Okay.
Right.
It goes into detail of
Do
application.
you talk to your employer about buying condoms?
I prefer not to.
Well, again, that's something
once again, I would
that
prefer
is
not to,
protected in this bill.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, and I think that comes down to I've had this conversation with several people, whether it comes down to and looks at, and it's still about the government, but the difference between the free market and the government and how they operate, right? In a free market, you're rewarded for doing the very best job you can as far under budget as possible, right?
Yeah.
The government operates the exact opposite. It wants to meet its budget no matter what it does with and it has to meet that budget so that the budget will be increased the next year. And I think that is sort of the problem that we end up having with regulation as well, of where rather than rolling things back and giving power, like what the Supreme Court did with giving power back to the states to make their own rulings, right? The government and the legislative body isn't doing that. We want to regulate everything from a centralized location, even if that's on the state level, right? And
Sorry.
There was it was Adams, I do believe, Samuel Adams, that said the best government is the least government.
Right.
Yep.
No,
I don't disagree with that one bit.
But part of the problem, the underlying problem, something that many people are not aware of. I just wanted to bring this up because I became aware of it yesterday. A lot of people did, but I don't think they understood the magnitude of it. You may want to, this may be eye-opening for you, Keith. Did you hear yesterday that Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York State, one of her employees and that employee's husband just got arrested. Well, they're being investigated and they're under indictment for being Chinese spies. Did you hear that?
I had seen something where, yeah, something along those lines. I'm not going to lie. My news feed tends to not be packed with the goings of New York and California.
See,
There,
that's the
Probably
trick
for
of
good
it all.
reason.
And let me explain why. What I put together, and I'm not going to play it right now. It's a 1 minute video, but it's not New York. It's not even just California. But what I was able to compile last night, in the middle of the night, since 2018, we've seen Dianne Feinstein had a 20-year spy working for her for the Chinese government. We have Eric Swalwell, half a dozen members of California's state-level government. All were involved with a Chinese spy, Fang Fang. We have the Chinese government has put into 20 colleges across America the Confucius Institute to teach about China and to recruit American students into the CCP to become communists and to be under the rule of the Chinese Communist government. That's in 20 colleges, including Binghamton University and many others. We have just, what was it, last year ago, we found out about the 4 illegal police stations of China operating in the United States amongst also 56 other countries around the world, but 4 police stations in the United States, not just 2 of them in New York State, in particular 2 in New York City, but also in California. I believe one was in Illinois and another was in, if I remember correctly, Florida. So what we're seeing is consistently a series of Chinese spies who are pushing communism, both through elected officials, the United States government, our institutions of higher learning, and now we see in the governor. And this has been going on not at the least on just quick research 2018. If you look more in depth, you can go back approximately 25 to 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, having heard that and found out about the fact that that this is happening across the country, let me ask you, Keith, how do you feel?
I mean, I don't think it's anything that hasn't been going on since before China. I mean, if you take China away, it was the Soviet Union, right, which was before my time. I think, I mean, does it make me happy? No. But do I think it's any different than what's happened before? I mean, once again, I'm too young to really have that much insight, but I mean, you see historical texts and you see readings and you hear information, what you've learned and how it was. And I mean, we're changing one for the other. And I think, sometimes the real problems that we are able to address and are able to solve, we end up not solving because we end up getting distracted by bigger issues that we think are more important, right? And the reality is, and one of the things, and maybe I have a very simple outlook on things, but I like to try to solve the problems that I can handle. Taking on the CCP police stations they're a little outside, a little over my head right now. You know what I mean? So,
well, that's kind of what I was pointing at. That's really where my question is, and perhaps I should have asked the question better. I apologize. How does it make you feel to know that this is happening? It's not just New York. It's not just California. It's across the country. It is in your state. It is in your community. You just aren't aware of it, or because the big news comes out about New York State or California, Illinois, the big cities, the big states. People think, oh, but it's not here. It is, and it is affecting you here.
It is, and it's everywhere. And I mean, I think if you look at big picture, that's why, what we were talking about earlier is the importance of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment is, at the end of the day, there's one reason why, as long as this country and the people and the civilians of this country are armed, we are ultimately going to be one of the hardest countries to ever take, because we have the population is trained. I'm not sure who was talking about the militia earlier and the importance of it, but that's 100%. That's 100% accurate. You know, I mean, yes, we do have one of the strongest military, and God bless our troops. But also at the same time, if they ever got by them, there's a whole nother army just sitting here waiting. You know, and I think that's a very strong point for what America was built on. And to me, is one police station. You know, I feel bad because the police station was probably
4 of them.
targeting in Florida, right? So the 4, but we're most likely probably impacting the lives of Chinese immigrants, right? And making their lives living hell, right?
Yeah.
Whether they were American citizens or not, I don't know. Once again, we're talking on a topic that I'm not sure of, right?
To kind of give some context, so there's Chris Chappell runs a channel called China Uncensored, and he was one of the places that I managed to pick up the line from these police stations. And it was after a press conference that was held by one of the security ministries of China, where they were talking about having CCP affiliates everywhere. In fact, within the United States government and within their law enforcement. And
2019. It was 2019. A gentleman named Dong Sheng.
Yeah.
And he didn't allude to it. He directly stated in an international conference that at the highest levels of the United States government and those candidates running as well were connected directly to the Chinese Communist Party.
Now,
that's alarming.
To kind of bring it back to what you do, like with your boss lock, for example, the regulations that came out to help to secure our firearms in our homes, right? A lot of that.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the cap mandates of New York, Massachusetts, California. Is that what you're referencing?
Cap mandates with also trigger locks and safes and so on, and like safely storing your firearms. Well, if you've stored your firearms away, in many cases, we've had to try and find options, which one of which you have created in your boss lock, is to give us accessible firearms when we need them, while still fostering a sense of safety to against misuse, right, or unauthorized use. And that impetus, that inspiration was actually spawned by these very forces that are trying to disarm us. So instead of disarming us, you came up with a solution to accommodate both, in essence. And you're creating a option for safety that will somewhat without disarming the populace, will offer the regulation, the compliance with the regulation without actually disarming the populace.
Correct. And that's part of it. But I want to make very clear, I am not in any way, shape, or form support or condone mandates or even the forced measures, right?
Right. I get that.
And I believe that we should, if you give people the tools, the right tool for their job, to do their job, they'll do it because, you know, that's the right thing to do. You know, maybe it's not everyone, but the majority, right?
I'm going to give you a scenario that I think Dal kind of, hitting around what he's saying. If we came up with a law that said everybody's got to have ID to vote, right? They all come on the other side and they said, oh, these people can't get ID because of this reason, that reason, that reason, this reason, and that reason. Well, then we turn around and go, okay, well, we're going to make the ID free. There'll be a call pool that people can go to, that they can go to the DMV. We're going to help them get their documentation done. It's going to take 15 minutes to do. And we eliminate every single one of the obstacles involved in getting somebody ID.
Right.
Then they go, okay, well, now you've taken away their objection.
Correct.
What Dowd's saying is you created a device that they didn't see coming.
Correct.
Yeah.
So with they're turning around and saying you're going to have to keep your gun in your safe, unloaded with your magazine someplace else with a cable lock through the mechanism. You're going to have to put a bolt through the barrel. You're going to have to put a trigger lock on the gun because you can't have immediate access to the firearm. You don't want that happening. And you said, well, here's what I'll do. I'm going to make a device that it renders the gun completely and totally useless, except for the one person who needs it.
Yeah.
When they need it.
And the having authorized users needing it. And
Right. You created. I'm not going to go through all the specs of your product right now. I'm just saying,
no.
You eliminated all of their arguments with the
Right.
invention of one product.
Yep.
You know, you did something that politicians have been trying to figure out how to do, and that's defeat their adversary simply.
Correct.
And you did it.
Well,
Now, unfortunately, I can't show. I've been sitting here. You might hear certain noises if I do that, you'll hear certain noises from something I'm not allowed to bring up on camera.
Or this noise, just this one right here, where it's just
keep it out of view. There you go.
That sound right there. That's how fast it goes. You know, I mean, and it's like I think we realize. I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, solutions and problems. You know, it doesn't require a piece of paper to solve the problems that the American citizens and the people are experiencing, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, parents want to be able to send their kid to school without worrying that there's going to be a mass shooting. I don't care whether you're left or right. I think any parent can agree with that statement. I think gun owners believe in protecting those who can't protect themselves and doing, you know, legal gun owners, concealed carry owners, right? Are genuinely carry a firearm for the right reasons, right? It's on us to preserve that way of life. It's on us to teach our children how to be the next generation of good gun owners, right? It's on us to teach them what freedom means. It's on us to teach them, right? So at the same time, then how can we say, oh, well, it's on the politicians to govern us and tell us to stop this? If we want to stop the problem, if we believe in a small centralized government, right, then we need to solve the problems amongst ourselves.
Right.
And it's that simple, right? And if we fail to innovate and we fail to push ourselves, we fail to drive our own communities forward, well, then we're through inaction forcing the federal government or for big government or other people to tell us how to solve the problem. And I think that's unacceptable to me.
Well, here's part of the thing is that you know you're going to be hitting the right keys with this, and whenever we actually come up with great solutions for the problems that they've created for us, you know how we know when they're going to work? When they try to regulate them.
Yep.
When we come up with a solution and the government comes in and steps in and says, hey, that's a great idea, but here's a bunch of regulations we want you to comply with.
Yep.
Because the regulations are there to intend the program to fail, so that they can turn around and say, see, you still need government.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's the thing is Liberty First Foundation was founded upon the idea that we need to solve problems in our communities. And by solving problems in our communities, then we can solve the problems that face our states and our nation. But we have to solve them first at home.
Right.
Okay. And we have to do it as a community, as we the people. We can't look towards the government to solve it. Because first off, the people that know how to solve the problems in their community best are the people that live in those communities.
Yep.
Okay. The federal government does not know how to solve a problem in West Chazy, New York.
Right.
Nope.
Okay. But the people that live in West Chazy, New York, we know exactly how to solve most of our problems if we come together and do it instead of relying on the government to step in for us.
And having it comes from that empowerment from, you know, supporting, and I completely agree with you. The communities know what they need best, right? And then providing the resources, the capabilities, right? Like I couldn't be more against CAT mandates or child access prevention mandates and laws. However, you know, if the government wanted to give a tax credit for people to implement, whether training or education, or hey, take a self-defense where you learn how to use a firearm, we'll provide you $300 or $400 on a tax return, right? Or here, implement like what Virginia did, where they implemented a $300, you know, buy a firearm safety method, right? Great. Incentivize people to do the right things or remove the barriers that cause them not to do it. So if people are saying, hey, you know, like how we came to this solution was, or our product was, why do I not want to implement firearm safety? It's because it takes too long, and it takes too long, and it's, you know, inconvenient. So we solve that problem. Why are people not implementing education and training or learning about their firearms, right? Well, because like you had said, it costs, I think you had said $1,000 to just even see if you want to pick up a pistol. That is, that's ridiculous, right? So how do we alleviate those pain points? How do we relieve that pressure? How do we provide people the skills that empower them? And the craziest thing about that is, you know, when the government's in New York, or I think it was New York you were referencing, Frank, when you had talked about that pistol, was how many people you actually hurting, right? Because we eventually went to our team went out to Michigan for the Legally Armed in Detroit event, where countless women were shooting for the first time, right?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar if you know Rick from that event, right? Great guy.
Protector.
Yes, yes, sir. Fantastic guy. But, you know, we went out there and we met an organization called Empowered 2A, right? Which is one of Gun Owner of America's, you know, championing, educating women on self-defense and firearms, right?
Did you get to meet Carrie Sloan?
I did. I did.
Okay.
Yes. And I saw her out in when we were in Knoxville as well, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, the whole thing is like, firearms are an equalizer. Firearms are a tool. And we had touched on this earlier, right? A firearm is an inanimate object. It's a tool to do a job, right? And it's in the hands of the people that it becomes good or bad. Right. And I think
that's it exactly.
Exactly. And it's teaching people and giving people the tools, right? You know, no different than if when my father taught me how to use a firearm, and how when I teach my brother and myself teach his kids, my nephews, how to use firearms, right? And one day I'll teach my kids the same, right? But there's those level of education we have to make sure that we're championing. We have to make sure we're providing the tools. And we all say, yeah, but where is it? You know, and I guess this is that hard question. If you go on Instagram, right, and everyone loves to see the fun, cool shooting, blowing things up, but where's the education on it?
Right.
Because
that's a big component that's missing.
Exactly.
And I do believe that some of that comes from, we are a very litigious society. Okay. People love to sue in this country.
Right. Yep.
And I think a lot of the education, why people don't educate so much, is because of liability.
No.
Okay. That's actually a very good point that I've never thought of, to be honest with you. You know, yes, you're 100% right in that.
I mean, it's left up to a bunch of individuals. And that's the other reason why you don't see a lot of it in public, is because a lot of times individuals will take it upon themselves to do the work. Like Maj Toure, for example, down in Philadelphia. Like he runs the Solutionary Center, right? And he's been working with members of his community as an individual for years. Mm-hmm. And really, he hasn't been able to get much traction until lately on social media. His solutionary ideas have been taking off, and he's been getting much more support. But these people, they work individually, and they work very much on a localized level. In that
Kevin
creates
Dixie
culture.
Is another one.
Yeah, that creates culture in that area, but it doesn't spread because we haven't really talked to each other to get that out there into the public space. And that's what a lot of groups like Liberty First Foundation and others, like Gun Owners of America, try to foster with these discussions, with the online presence, with the people in our own communities, telling everyone, spread the word. Don't keep it to yourself anymore. It's great that you teach your kids. It's great that you teach your extended family, but it's not enough. We have to teach everyone.
Okay. Just a little bit of pushback, Dal, because I do know Maj. And Maj is a great guy. I met him in 2019. One of his first interviews he ever did was with me.
Yeah.
His Solutionaries program, which is creating a community center to teach people how to properly use firearms, how to register to get firearms, to bring proper gun ownership into the urban center of Philadelphia. That program, that plan that he's doing, he's about $200,000 away from buying the first building and property for his community center that he could then replicate it. It's the proof of what do you call
Concept.
it? Proof of
concept.
That's it. That's the first one. This is meant to be something he's going to be duplicating. But he has been working on that since 2019. He's been rather successful, and he has gotten some national attention on that. So he's my friend, and I know I knew a little bit more about that, so I just wanted to bring that up. But we need more of these kinds of programs, and you're right.
I agree.
More awareness.
I guess the question I have is, so if he needs $200,000 to get this building for a proof of concept idea, right? That could make an on the ground impact to make Philly safer and educate people of firearms. Why is that funding not something that's easily accessible for him from 2019 when the federal government's funding university programs to conduct gun research left, right, and center? Right. Out of Michigan and the University of Michigan, right? So, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, right? Yeah. So the question is why I would have in that scenario is why do we support so willingly taxpayer funds to point out more problems, but then the only solutions that we're getting is either regulation from the government or privately funded solutions like Maj is doing in Philly.
Right.
Well, and that's I know in part the government doesn't want to give them the money. They've refused, in fact, to provide help along that. In fact, they've been putting roadblocks. Part of the reason why he's raising $1 million, he's raised 800,000. They're actually putting roadblocks and conditions and limitations on him because it is teaching people about the Second Amendment. It also plans to provide. And by the way, this is all free. He's going to teach classes, have in that center classes for people to learn how to become a nurse, a certified CNA, I think it's called, to be able to get additional education so they can go into college. Also, gun control as well. Well, not gun control, proper gun use, register for guns and such, train with it. So he's looking to do all of that. This is all going to be free. Right. When he hits that $1 million, it's not just buy the building, it's also provide the services. And because he's doing that for free to the public without government intervention, the government doesn't like that. And Philadelphia itself is holding him back. And that's the problem. You innovate, you create something, and you notice, then the government comes in and says, but wait a minute. Kind of like the ATF when it came to pistol braces. It's how many times have we seen similar things like that where the government steps in and says, oh, you want to have a bulletproof vest? You can't have that. It's passive personal self-defense. That's obviously dangerous. So we have to make that a crime. It's counterintuitive. And I think the answer to that is passive government having more power.
Interesting.
Now, Keith, I had a question. You mentioned early on that you got California certification for the B.O.S lock, right?
Yes, sir.
What was the process for that? Why is that important in the sense of does it affect distribution nationwide?
So it doesn't affect it nationwide. What it does is it is the highest level of testing to ensure safety. So prime example, they give a grown adult, they attach it to the firearm. They give a grown adult household tools, crowbars, screwdrivers, ball peen hammers, all of that, right? And they give them 15 minutes to do whatever they want, right? To try to break into this thing. And the idea is what you're trying to do is mimic what a highly motivated 17, 18-year-old would do to be able to gain access to the function of the firearm, right? That's one test. Another one is they try to rip it open with 200, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but 260, 280 pounds of torque, like ripping on it, right?
Wow.
So that tiny little arm that's on the side of it, they hooked up chains to it, fixed it in place, and pulled on it with up to exceeding 280 pounds of force, right? Which is kind of, I always laugh about it because, like, yeah, I guess if you're going like this, if you go to the gym a lot, you can bench 280 pounds, right? Well,
Right.
some people, right? But, doing it between your fingers and pulling with 280 pounds of force is a whole different story. But hey,
Right.
we still passed, right? And then they have a hacksaw test, right? Which Frank can talk about the success that he had with that.
No, I can't. I can't talk. I cannot talk about the hacksaw success because there was no hacksaw success.
Exactly. That's success from my side then.
From my side, it was 25 minutes of standing around the 95-degree heat going, the hell did they make this friggin' thing out of?
Well, the interesting thing is we actually had a great partner who advised us on some of our coatings on that arm and hardening process. Absolute fantastic guy.
It's more than just the coating. The shit inside of it that makes
there's a whole process to it. Yes, you are correct. Yes.
Huh.
But
I
No, go
tried.
ahead.
Keith sent me 2 of the units, and then he sent me an arm separately. I told him, I said, listen, I don't want to. I said, look, here's the deal. I can get into Fort Knox given enough time and enough opportunity. Okay.
Right.
You leave me to my own devices, I'll get through anything. It's not a matter of me trying to destroy the device. I can destroy anything. I have the means of destroying anything. If I take an oxyacetylene torch to this thing, I'm going to destroy it. But you know what? I'm also going to destroy the gun it's attached to. Okay, completely negating the whole purpose of having a device to lock the gun out if you want to use the gun, right? You don't want to destroy the gun just to be able to use it because it's not going to be useful anymore. I said, so just do me a favor. I said, just send me an arm. And that's it. Just send me the arm. I went through, I took the hacksaw and I tried cutting into the hacksaw with a 80 TPI blade. That's 2 teeth per inch.
Right.
Couldn't scratch the coating on this thing. I couldn't scratch.
Well done. Well done.
I got this thing. I have the arm sitting in a vise with just like the tip of it hanging out, and I'm not. All right, the arm is kind of shaped like a hook, right?
Right.
I'm not like on the outside of it. I put it upside down so I could rest the blade on the inside of the hook so I could centralize the cutting without it wobbling side to side, and I couldn't get through it. Then I turned around and I grabbed a hold of my Dremel, and I put diamond impregnated discs in it that I use for cutting tile, and I use for cutting glass, and I use for cutting the hardest of materials. There's 30 discs in a tube. I went through 30 discs.
Wow.
And I could not get through anything. I was going to break out and say, okay, so I'm going to break out the big guns and I'm going to go grab my angle grinder. And I have some stuff that gets through anything with my angle grinder. Right. And then I thought about it. And I said, well, now I'm defeating the purpose of the test. Because if I'm a kid and my parents have a firearm and I'm trying to play with it, I'm an 11, 12-year-old kid. I'm not going out to the garage to find dad's
angle grinder.
It's not the most common tool to begin with. Right. The most people who are going to have one are probably going to have sanding discs on it, maybe a fiber wheel on it. They're not going to have titanium and diamond blades that cost $400 a blade. That's the kid's not going to have access to that. No. All right.
At most, the kid might end up getting a hold of a Black & Decker Sawzall.
Yeah, he might
with a metal blade.
And what is the kid going to do? Okay, he wants to play with the gun, so he's going to take the gun out into the garage, put the gun in a vise, set the thing up, run an extension cord, grab the Sawzall, say they're trying to cut through it.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Kids are not playing with the gun. If kids want to play with a gun, they want to look at the gun, look at the gun. They don't want to get caught, right?
Right.
A kid don't want to get caught playing with the gun because he knows he's going to get in trouble. The only way he's going to get through this device is to ruin it so badly that it's kind of obvious that somebody was messing with it.
Right.
So the kid's going to get in trouble. So this leaves it to the other people. Who's going to be most determined to try and get through this thing?
Criminals.
All right. Criminals. A criminal is not going to sit in your house with the gun using your tools to try and get it. He's going to go into your house. He's going to grab your valuables. Oh, look at that, a gun. I'm going to take that too. He's going to grab it and he's going to go. Now he's someplace else. He's somebody else's problem. Okay.
Right.
He's going to destroy the gun getting this damn thing off. All right. Yeah. So that's beside the point. The only person you really have to worry about it is somebody who's looking at the firearm as a means of opportunity, and that's somebody suicidal.
Right.
This is far too much trouble for somebody suicidal to try and figure out how to get through and avoid when there's 1,000 other means at their disposal to do what they want to do.
Right.
And I think you just nailed on essentially what the entire point of that California. You asked basically why did we go to California, and Frank, you covered it right there. Is the tests, while California is not a pro-gun in remotely environment,
Right,
even remotely, but they did put together, although some would argue unreasonable, but ultimately, hey, if you can pass all these tests and become certified, right?
right.
You can be relatively confident that you can put the responsibility on your shoulders. That listen, parents can trust you and your product with the lives of their children. And that to me is, at that point, I don't care how hard the test is. I want to make sure that you're creating the best product that meets those needs, right? So from the first and foremost, that safety side.
Well, where they go crazy with their testing, I told you when we first started, I says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this the absolute most real world tests increased by 20%. Because once you get beyond the 20% threshold, that's the threshold that people are going to give up at.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to go through that extent. And we don't want to say, like I said, we can destroy it, but what's the point?
Exactly.
Right.
Marshall, go ahead. I cut you off on Bob.
I am going to recommend. I commend you for going through the California tests. I would also recommend that you go through Underwriter Laboratories.
Okay.
They will put it through, and if you get that UL certification, that's going to set you also.
Okay. I mean,
that actually opens up a lot of doors for you as well, as far as credibility and so forth.
See, and with Underwriter Laboratories, you might actually have a shot of selling it in New York State.
Yeah, that's a national laboratory.
Gotcha.
So
I would be interested to know. So you created one for pistols, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking of a long gun option?
We can't talk about that right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are things we cannot talk about.
Our goal is to be a tool for all gun owners on all platforms to find a way.
Fair enough.
For speed of access, capability, and safety,
Right.
And once again, like I said, it's a tool for people. I understand that this is not a tool for every single gun owner out there, right? That's not the purpose. It is for the person and the people who have children and who feel that it's a good fit for them. And we stand so much behind that. Like, told Frank, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't like it and it doesn't fit into your life and you don't see it add value to your life, we'll take it back and give you your money back. That's how strong we feel about this, right? Because once again, too, it is a very new and novel way to execute a decision, right? To be able to, secure a firearm in this manner. A lot of people, for the first couple months, we had to do a lot of explaining about what it was. People asked me, why do I want a biometric slide release? And I was like, well, that's not exactly what it is. Right. It's a slide
oversimplification.
Right. And it's because it works within the actual function of the firearm. And I think it's foreign to people. And look, we had to do a lot of explaining.
This was also foreign to you too. This was all a lot of new territory. You and I have spent hours on the phone. All right. Hours on the phone, hours in person.
Yep.
Going over stuff. How many different ways have we figured out how this is applicable? There's so many different circumstances that weren't even in your wheelhouse when you first developed this. And we were like, okay, look at all this whole realm of possibility that's out there without changing a damn thing.
Exactly.
And we were like, wow, the more you think about it, Look, and listen, and Keith knows this and Marshall, you noticed too. I friggin' hate biometrics.
Mhm.
I hate biometrics. My first job on Wall Street, way back in 1991, it was working with the first biometric keypads in existence and the
Yeah.
first optical sensors in existence. When I used to get into a vault filled with billions of dollars in gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium, everything for the commodity exchange.
Right.
Biometrics have been a nemesis of mine since 1991. I hate them. I cannot count how many times I did not get my time card punched because I stood there, bink, 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 and I couldn't get the goddamn thing to read my finger. And I have 25 safes in the garage. 25 all have biometric sensors on them. I have some that open up 80% of the time. I have some that open up 90% of the time. I have 2 of them that open up for fingerprints that are not registered to it. Okay. I hate with every fiber of my being anything biometric. I hate it because I have a tendency of burning myself because I deal with blowtorches and I weld and I do stuff and I usually burn my fingertips off at some point. I hate biometrics. They're my nemesis. This friggin' thing, it's not reading my fingerprint. It's reading my mind. Okay, this thing is the most ridiculously accurate biometric device I have ever tested. I cycled this thing 1,000 times
With pizza grease on your fingertips, as I recall.
with blood on my. I actually was
really?
I was in the kitchen making strawberries and cream, and I slit my finger open. I slit this finger open. And while my finger was bleeding all over the place, I said, "Oh, I got an idea." I ran up to the armory, unlocked the door, grabbed the gun that had this thing sitting on it, put blood all over my one finger that's registered for it, and it worked.
Wow.
I ran 1,000 tests. This thing opened 998 times on the first attempt. Of the 2 attempts where it didn't open, it wasn't like it just didn't, and I had to stop and try again. I just had to reposition my finger.
And
just on those times.
And that's what we found is one of the unique things about this and I'm not trying to go down a geek rabbit hole because I'll do that no problem, right? But what makes it unique is in that how the algorithm actually for a period of time, once it starts, it's shooting, capturing. It captures every 50 milliseconds, it's taking an image, right? And comparing that and authorizing it. So in that course of 1 second, right, you're getting 20 some shots and that it's running instantly. And that's how we get that 0.46 secure to ready to go. And most like Frank was saying, most of the time, like if it gets you a red read,
right,
that's probably because it's that user error of the adrenaline rush you're missing, right?
Now go ahead and finish out what you got.
And I was saying is then it's a positioning thing. And then you have, once again, what we're trying to do is create that environment where you just make sure you got focus on simple things, get a good read, get a good sight picture, get a good trigger pull, right? And those getting down to those simple basics. Because once again, like at the end of the day, we're just simple country kids who figured out, hey, here's how we do something that is a product that we will use ultimately.
Yeah.
Is what we're creating. We built the product.
We got 2 minutes and 3 things to cover.
Okay.
Marshall.
Okay. With my job, I slice, especially my index finger, a lot. Okay, little cuts. How's it deal with those?
So, I mean, it's like anything. It depends on, if you're taking off, then all your ridges and everything completely and your fingerprints basically, there's nothing for it to read, right? But once again, it's a capacitor reader. So let's say you do have a slice on your finger, right? You program that in when that slice heals, right? You keep going, right? And it does have a element of where it does compare and see how the finger evolves, right, to that algorithm, right? And the other thing is it's not like it's just one fingerprint that's accessible, right? There are 50 prints that you can store in there, right? So whether that's you, your wife, your mom, your dad, your next door neighbor, if you trust them, right? Plus a non-dominant hand, plus a finger that is scarred, right? There's a lot you can program into that, right?
Okay.
And
Now,
that was sort of our
I
thought.
tell people with the biometrics, especially with something like this, that if you're going to have a device like this or a biometric safe or anything else like that, don't just rely on one or two fingerprints. Do all the fingerprints on your dominant hand, do all the fingerprints on your non-dominant hand, because you don't know what kind of shape you're going to be in or what you're going to have to go through to get to that device. You might be covered in blood, you might be covered in oil, you might be covered in grease, dirt, whatever. You might not have use of your hand at that point. So with a device like this, when it's attached to your firearm, especially this, and it's your firearm, it literally takes you 3 seconds to program a fingerprint into this thing. So program multiple.
Right.
The only people who are not going to get through it are people who are not programmed into it.
Right.
So program multiple fingerprints. It just for anything. I mean, what happens if you get your finger blown off? Guy comes through your house, you're through your door shooting, you blow a finger off. Now you can't do nothing with your gun. Well, that's why God gave you 10 fingers.
Right.
I mean, it might be registerable with other appendages too. I don't know. I didn't try. I am not.
I can't confirm on any other appendages, or I can confirm fingerprints.
Okay, I mean, you might be able to use a toe. I don't know. Who the hell knows? Listen, guys, we're actually at 9:01. I apologize for coming in late tonight. I had a miscommunication with my comrade here as to what time we were going to be coming on today. So I got here a little late, but
thought you were going to blame the secretary.
Yeah, there were two things I wanted to do. First, I wanted to share this with Dal, so that we had a little conversation off screen. So Dal, okay, all right. So that was the first thing I wanted to share with Dal. The second thing I wanted to share. Yesterday, the Second Amendment community took a tremendous loss. There's a legend in our community by the name of Paul Harrell. Paul has been around for years. Guy's a legend. All right, competitive shooter. He's had to use his firearm in self-defense. The guy has got milk crates and totes full of awards and championships. The guy is just one of the nicest, steadfast, loyal supporters of the Second Amendment and individual rights that we have ever known. We've never known the man to raise his voice. We've never known him to get his ire up or be angry. He had a presentation like nobody else, and he did a gun review like nobody else could possibly do. Paul Harrell was a one of a kind. Last night at about 6:30, we lost Paul to pancreatic cancer. Easily 30 years before his time. Paul is a genuine legend in the community. We lost a pillar of our community. This was a guy who did what he did for the love of what he did and the love of the people he was doing it for. He didn't do it to self-aggrandize. He didn't do it for personal fortune. He didn't do it for personal fame. He didn't do it for clicks. He didn't do it for clickbait. He didn't do it to blow stupid things up and make an idiot out of himself. He just wanted to inform and educate people so they had the best knowledge at hand when they were making choices at what would be good for them to use to defend themselves, their families, their communities, and their country. Paul Harrell, wearing his shirt. This is, legends live forever. On behalf of Liberty First Foundation and the Range Report, Paul, God bless you. Thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for the knowledge. And thank you for everything you did for all of us. So, we'll see you on the other side somewhere, Paul. You take care.
May his memory be eternal.
So I wanted to address that before we went, because like I said, when We've been pulling. Lori and I lost a good friend of ours a couple of months ago to pancreatic cancer as well. And I've lost 2 other people that I've known to pancreatic cancer. And it is, of every malady that's out there, that is the one that ravages the fastest, the most vicious. It is horrific, and it's virtually incurable. And I don't understand why we spend so much money on, like we were talking about before, shrimp on a friggin' treadmill, and how to, test the flow rate of ketchup and all these other stupid things. And we have people that die all the time for diseases.
Breeding habits
Yeah.
of crickets on cocaine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not a believer in the federal government using our money for anything except the military and securing the nation. Everything else, leave it the hell alone. But if you're going to take all money and you're going to do things in the auspices of research, study what matters.
Right.
Study what matters. We haven't had a cure for anything in God knows how long, And then you look at the private sector. I have a cousin who's deaf. Got a cochlear implant. She got a hearing back.
Mm-hmm.
This is the private sector doing it. The private sector creating things and doing things, and they're coming up with cures. But for some reason or another, we can't seem to harness anything about cancer, really.
And a lot of that has to do with government regulation. So even the private sector who could innovate on something like that isn't allowed to because of the way the government structured the regulations. And they're the ones that are stealing all our money. As far as I'm concerned, the government needs to crowdfund any spending that they do.
Well, yeah, that would be a good thing. Let the people who believe in that pet project pay for that pet project,
right,
and leave the money elsewhere so that the real scientists can get the job done.
Right.
But it just sickens me to know that, like I said, if you want to see something get cured, give it to the child of a president somewhere. You'll see some shit get cured first, but it'll be a miracle. It'll be, won't be doing, that too will be sequestered from the people. We're not allowed to benefit from what we pay for in this country. But it just sickens me that we have really good people in this world that have to suffer and die every day because we put our faith and trust into people we shouldn't.
Yeah.
And they promise us the moon, and they don't even give us the light. They don't do nothing for us. And it's just a goddamn shame. And then people wonder why we have so much distrust in government. Well, you lie to us about everything. Here we got one candidate out there this week changed her accent 3 different friggin' times, depending upon what group of people she was talking in front of. Do you expect realism?
They either lie or obstruct.
Or
infringe, right? Lie, obstruct, or infringe.
Yeah, makes me sick. Well, listen, I don't know if Vass is going to come back, but we're already past the 2-hour mark tonight. I'm going to get myself out of here because you saw me scoff down my pizza while I was sitting here eating. Well, now the acid reflux is right up about here. I chased it with 24 ounces of orange juice.
Well, I did want to say, guys, thank you for inviting me on. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I hope to get the chance to come back and do this again. You guys, this has been fun. This has been fun.
Anytime.
You're always welcome, Keith.
Oh,
let's bring your partner back in too next time.
he's a little more shy,
Yeah,
but he's a great guy, super smart, great business mind, but he's not, his favorite spot is not the cameras,
That's right. He does well. He's a good man.
He's a good guy.
Man. We enjoy his company. He's fun whenever I talk to him. But listen, you're always welcome to come back in and join us. Remember, you and I have a conversation tomorrow at some point before you make that phone call to those other people I told you about.
Yes, sir. I'll jump on the phone. I'll jump on the phone with you first thing tomorrow morning.
All right. This way I can fill you in on the rest of the vision.
Awesome.
trying to make things happen for good people. That's what we're all about.
I love that. And it's one of the things that us, it's incredible, fighting you. Cause I mean, you guys and all of you, because, so oftentimes that is what it really takes, especially, connecting with people, learning from their experiences, learning from what they see. And that's how we actually can solve and make a difference. Right.
Well, that's our, like I said, that's our whole premise is to work together as communities to come up with solutions,
as opposed to waiting for the government
to make
exactly
to come up with solutions for us. We can do it ourselves.
Yeah,
we've been doing it since this country was founded as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when they were talking about the school lunches and the starving children up in Michigan, and I yelled at them. Like we were there was a whole big discussion, and in the whole thing, I'm like, why are you waiting? If it's that important, why are you waiting for legislation when you can just go right down to the school district and you could feed the kids?
When people get pissed off and they're tired of something, they will make change, right? Yeah. They will do it whether the government wants them to do it or not. If they are motivated enough to do something, American spirit and that American ingenuity will find a way.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake. My dog just walked in. Well, listen, it's like always at Thanksgiving when you hear the headline at 6:00 in the afternoon from your local news. What you should know about your Thanksgiving turkey that could kill you. Film at 11. You're already done eating the damn turkey. Now you got to wait till 11 to find out what the hell is in it that just killed you.
You're passed out by then.
$1 short. They don't know what the hell they're doing. That's why you don't rely on the media. You don't rely on government. All right, listen. I'm going to book out of here because my dog just came up and knocked on the door, which tells me he's got to go out. So I'm going to be that and see you guys tomorrow. Keith, we'll talk tomorrow. Marshall, you and I will talk. Dal, thanks again for coming in. Vass, we'll catch you on the flip side. You guys can hang around. I'm going to get out of here. As always, you guys be safe and shoot straight. We'll catch you on the next time.
Later, Frank. Love you guys.
See you, Frank.
And I'm gonna dip out here soon as well. And I do want to say thank you guys for inviting me on. This has been absolutely enlightening.
You're welcome back anytime.
And thank you so much. And we'll get in touch and I'll get all y'all's information from Frank and we'll be keeping in touch.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you guys.
And when you start distributing in New York, I'm gonna probably buy one.
Absolutely.
I have to get a pistol for it first.
Yeah.
Apparently, hey, it's, with all the work you guys got to go through to do up there, I can't even believe that, right? Like,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
And what's worse is that even if no matter where you are in the step of things, you don't get that money back if something happens. So like I can pay $250 for my application, and then if I get denied for any reason, then I have to pay another $250. I don't get a refund. So by the time they're done refusing you for whatever arbitrary reason they've decided, you could already be $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 in, and now you still have to buy the firearm. So you could get the permit and just never buy a firearm because you just can never afford it.
And then that's it. You get a permit to purchase.
Right.
You don't actually have your firearm permit yet.
Right.
You have a permit to purchase.
Right. So there's a permit to purchase.
That can't be legal.
It's not. That
can't be legal.
It's not. It's a direct infringement on the constitutionality of our Second Amendment. But because it's New York and nobody really makes a stink about it except for a very few groups of people, we're stuck.
Okay. And then you can go out and purchase your firearm. Okay. Then you can actually get your permit after you've purchased your firearm. Okay. And then any other firearms that you get, you have to add them onto your permit.
Right. And you have to renew that permit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
I don't think, and listen, like, I don't think I could, I'm sorry. That's all I can say. It's like, that's just,
but that's just for handguns.
Well, that's
like that's the thing. It's like you can walk into an FFL for a long gun and you can be approved on the spot and walk out with a long gun the same day.
Not a semi-auto.
as long as it's not a semi-automatic. So you can get a lever action as long as it's only 7 rounds. So they have a cap, like a magazine cap.
Yeah.
So it's got to be 7 rounds or less. It can't have any tactical or military style aesthetics.
So it can't be
like,
black or can't have a pick rail.
Right. So if I wanted to say one of the Henry Thunders, the modified ones for hog hunting, can't have those because they got a Picatinny rail on them. So that's a no-go. Even the M1 Garand, the rifle that you can get from the CMP, right? So it's illegal in New York State. Yeah, I know, right?
You're giving me anxiety right now, man. Like, I thought it was bad.
An M14 isn't.
What?
An M14 isn't.
No,
I mean,
An actual military rifle.
Yep, an M14 you can have, but it has to be, the barrel has to be so long, and it cannot have a suppressor on it, or like a flash suppressor or any kind of compensator on it. It's got to be just a straight barrel, and it has to have iron sights. Like,
it's like, I mean, I hate saying it, but it's almost like we live in different worlds when it comes to that. Because like now,
right? Yeah.
Let's say I want to go buy 5 new handguns. I can walk down to the gun store.
Buy 5 new handguns.
I show them my concealed carry, and I walk out that day.
No, we can't do that.
No, and it's like, here, I mean, obviously, both Texas and Florida are obviously constitutional carries, right?
Right.
And there are benefits, though, to having our concealed still, right? Which is one of them being is I have no wait period at all. I'm already basically, I think of it like TSA pre-check for guns, right?
Right.
But
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So when you think about it that way, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also an element too of, I do see a benefit too of, it almost sort of delineates or separates the person who owns one gun versus the person who might know what they're doing, right?
The casual carry from the actual trained carry.
Right. And I think, and that's one of the things that I think we have to respect inside of our community, right? Is that everyone's, and it's probably one of my biggest issues that as I've gone older, I've seen, my biggest fault, I would say, with our community is like, how oftentimes do you go on social media and you hear people saying, oh, if you're carrying a 22, you shouldn't even carry a firearm at all. And,
oh my God. Yeah.
And my response to them always is, especially because oftentimes they'll say this to, a first-time female shooter, a first-time shooter, right? And they're like, there's no point in you carrying if you're going to shoot a 22. And I say, listen, the person who's willing to step up and get shot 3 times in center mass with a 22, then once you've done that, you can say there's no point in carrying a 22, right? I'm not volunteering to get shot by a 22 anywhere, right? It just does not sound like fun, right? So, to me, it's like, once again, it comes down to there's the right tools, right? I think inside of our community, we have to be, people need to stop being experts and saying there's only one way to do things. I think we need to take and inform and educate and empower people to make their own decisions. And in order to do that, that's education, not dictating on how things have to be.
Correct.
And that's sort of just, one of the biggest points that I want to talk about as much as possible anytime I get a chance is because, if we want us to bolster our community, make our community bigger, we have to be open and welcoming and be empathetic to what other people's life walks are. Right. That doesn't mean we have to compromise our values or compromise our standards of what this community stands for. Right. But we have to be welcoming to that. What your standards or how those standards apply to your life are different than what somebody else's are. And I think if we do that, we can make the size and the commitment of people within the 2A community, within the firearms community, much stronger, those bonds much more cohesive so that we're able to achieve bigger things.
It's one of the reasons why I brought Carrie Sloan up, because she every so often will post on social media some of her success stories. And a lot of the people that she's training are very new to firearms. They often come from backgrounds where they have never conceived of possibly ever shooting a firearm in their life, and now they see a need for it. And they don't want to go with a heavy revolver. They don't want to go with like what a lot of these, and I'll call them FUDs for lack of a better term. They're these FUDites that will be like, well, you need the reliability of a revolver. You know, when a revolver malfunctions, it's catastrophic. It'll blow your hand off.
Yep.
It may not do it often, but when it happens, it's catastrophic. Now, and Carrie, to go back to her, she is really great as an empathetic instructor. And I've seen a lot of her work with these women, especially, that are just, they think they can handle it, but then they step up and they get a hold of the firearm, and then they're like, oh my God, and they're shaking. And then you watch them, and she's right there to be like, it's okay. You know, you're not being judged for this, right? Baby steps, aim down sight, finger when you're ready, pull the trigger, like squeeze the trigger, boom. And then after that, they're fine. And then they start to be, that's how you empower people, is you give them the choice of when to squeeze that trigger, how to aim down sights and be safe with their firearm, so that then they can choose, you know what, I want something a little bigger. Maybe I want something a little more, I want something a little bit longer, shorter, however, but they get to make the choice. It's about options, discourse, and choices.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
So I agree with you.
The best firearm for self-defense is a firearm that you're going to carry.
Right. I mean, my granddad for many years carried a small automatic 22. And I asked him, I said, why don't you carry anything a little bit bigger? And he said, Nick, I'm nearly 85 years old. And I don't want to be carrying around a lot of ammunition that's super heavy. I can carry a 22 long rifle, or I can carry a 22 Magnum, and I can have twice as many rounds in that as if, you know, if I tried to carry a 9mm and it was super heavy in my pocket. That was his daily carry all the time. At the
end of the day, if that made him confident and feel safer or have me more capable, whatever whether it's a 22, a 9mm, a 45, or a 50 cal, or if you want to be walking around with a 6.5 Creedmoor bolt action on your back, whatever you do you, boo boo, you know, like.
Well, so, I mean, and the way he explained it was, you know, everybody stops if you shoot him in the head, and he was no joke. He was no joke. Like he would. It's
the old Tyson. It's the old Tyson quote. Everyone's got a plan until you punch him in the teeth, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, and you know, most people are like, well, shoot center mass, shoot center mass. No. For Granddad, it was you shoot where you're going to stop them the most effectively, and that was in the head. And so he could take 15. He knew his engagement range for that 22 was 15 feet, 20 feet. That was it. After that, it's no good. So he figured most of the times that he was going to end up having to use it for self-defense was going to be within 15 to 20 feet of somebody. Mm-hmm. And so that's how he trained, and that's how he trained me. And, you know, most of the time you take someone to the head, you're not getting back up again. So
like I said, I said I didn't want to get shot with a 22 in center mass. I'm definitely not volunteering to get shot with a 22 in the forehead. I'm gut pass.
Just remember, right hemisphere.
I'm going to politely recuse myself from volunteering for that one. Okay.
As the youth of today's day,
will do to a grapefruit at 15 feet.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Okay,
my grapefruit's just fine. I like it inside the hat, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So no, it's all about what you're comfortable with and what you're willing to train with. And then that changes as you evolve, right?
Exactly.
And the trick is then, if you are going to evolve, you always stick around with people that will help you either graduate to something else or give you better options. Exactly. And that's part of that community discourse and all those options that we give. And that's why you're being innovative with the Boss Lock opens up a huge amount of avenues for people that are maybe like, I have a big family, or I have a lot of people that move through my house. Mm-hmm. I can't carry on me all the time, but I need to have firearms that are accessible to me, not to anybody else. You, unlike anything else, yours gives accessibility and workability all in one package. Whereas otherwise, you're just fumbling with trigger locks and you're trying to get into safes where you shouldn't be.
Yep. And it's like, ultimately, it's one of the biggest thing that I always found, and one of the hardest things for us to, when we were designing and developing this, was if you make something that's not convenient for people, right, they're not going to use it.
That's
Right.
it.
And that's myself included. So by making something that actually works into the actual function of the firearm,
Right.
you increase the likelihood that people will actually adopt it and actually utilize it. And it's, once again, the same thing too, is people pick it up, they practice it, they get used to it. And, at the end of the day, that gets them more comfortable with their firearm. And once you begin to remove those barriers across that threshold of, because once again, not everyone grew up shooting,
Right.
some people, oftentimes some of the women that we talk to at some of these events, like the first time they've ever picked up a firearm was at these events. And it's because they're like, okay, I need to be able to protect myself. Right. Or something happened. Right. And let's not go there, but
no, I get you.
They're driven to it. And at the end of the day is you want them to be comfortable. Right. And that's the most beautiful thing about a firearm, is at the end of the day, it's a very empowering tool and it's the greatest equalizer out there.
Right. And even if they're driven to it, once they're comfortable, now they're empowered. So they pursue it as opposed to being driven towards it.
And then they go on and they champion it out to others. Right. And I think that's where the community, and I keep talking about this, but the community opening that dialogue, and why what we're doing here is so important, right, is to create a space for the First Amendment, for people to talk, for people to have dialogue, for people to have discourse, right, where they can have differences of opinions. And then you can see and listen to somebody who you may not fully agree with on everything, but you can see their perspective, which may enlighten and inform your own perspective to get to another level, which was what, when you really think about what the First Amendment was, is that's what it was for, right? To be able to talk freely amongst each other, to not be scared of what you say. And that's why when I think it was Lisa was saying, people are scared to talk about firearms in New York. And I'm like, honestly, I do get that, because I did a brief stint in DC, and it was like, wow, this is the first time I've ever felt like, wow, I really can't say what I think, right? I really can't let people know I am pro-gun, right? And it was a very almost difficult situation, right? And I think, if that's how a lot of times people sometimes feel in this, who are members of our community, and we have to provide them a place where they can talk, where they can share their voices with others. And they can start chiseling away at the people who they think, who they think don't think like them, but might actually, right? Because that mindset is scary, because everyone begins to think that they're the only one who thinks like that. So they shut down, when right next to them or around them could be 10 or 15 other people who think exactly like them or similar to them. And then they could band together and spread their message. And
do you notice? I just want to mention, Keith, because what you're talking about is the interconnection between the First Amendment and the Second.
Correct.
They're not separate. A lot of people, we hear often mostly from the left, that they're two separate things and one doesn't interplay with the other, but they're absolutely connected. That if you're chilling one, you almost directly and usually indirectly are chilling the other. And you're right. People feel like they can't speak, but that's because the same people who would restrict your ability to defend yourself are the same people who are restricting your ability to speak. And they're the same thing, because I can defend myself with my words. I can also defend myself in other means. The first avenue is my voice. So if I can't do one, then why do I believe I can do the other?
Right.
So that's what I hear. That's what I'm hearing. And I think it's absolutely essential that we make it very clear for people, because I don't think most of the time people will put that together. It's not always something that people immediately come to. It's like, no, if you stop one, you stop the other, then you don't have either.
Correct.
And the same thing goes with the rest of the amendments of the Bill of Rights, because if you don't have 1 and 2, then the other ones fall apart, because you can't enforce anything.
Correct.
Right? You can't enforce your unalienable rights. So your right to due process is out the window. Your right to keep soldiers in peacetime from quartering in your home is out the window. Your ability to protect your papers and your property is out the window, because you can't redress your grievances using your voice, and you can't ultimately thwart or neutralize a threat to yourself or your person and property with the second.
Correct.
So of all of the amendments, the first two are not only conjoined, but they support everything that follows.
That's
It's
what
almost-
it is for a second. Go ahead.
It's almost like the founding fathers placed them first and second for a reason.
Well, that
You-
we've had discussions about that. They actually weren't the first and second.
Well,
No.
guys, thank you again so much for having me on. This has been an absolute pleasure. I do gotta get going, but this has been a great time, and I really hope to have the opportunity again.
Yes, please come back.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Appreciate
Enjoyed
it.
having you.
Anytime, Keith.
All right. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Made it back.
So
Welcome back.
we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. About a
Welcome
half
back
hour
to
longer
go
than
away.
we wanted to be, but it
Yeah.
is what it is.
And that was actually, for our first show, that was actually quite informative. And I did not realize we had a second guest until the last minute. So that was cool.
Well, none of us did.
Yeah.
Frank just shortly before the show said that he's coming on.
Yeah.
Okay.
And-
Well, this was our first Wednesday. Folks, we're going to be here every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to join us from here on out. If you followed us on Fridays, make sure you tune into our new date times.
Yep.
So with that, we want to thank everybody that's in the audience. We want to thank our guests. Big thank you to
Lisa O'Keefe
Lisa O'Keefe
and
and
Keith Bomba.
Bombach.
I'm lousy with names.
Keith and Lisa, thank you very much for coming on the
Yes.
show. If you're
Thank you
still
very
listening.
much. And folks, nothing's going to change until the people change it.
Right.
Okay, we can wait around for government to solve our problems, but government has a
They're not
vested
going to.
interest in not solving problems because that gives them their legitimacy. Okay, the best people to solve the problems are we the people. Okay, find yourselves a constitutionally thinking organization to join. Okay,
Join us.
we have a constitution for a reason. And that reason is to hold our government in check. And right now, our government is not in check. And I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, you're both violating the Constitution.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. Okay.
Join us.
You can join the Liberty First Foundation. You can find us at l1f.us. And that's our premise is we are a community-based we're a nationally based organization that works on solving community issues first. And by creating a culture in the communities, we can actually change the culture of a nation. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.